Britain remains a military power out of all proportion to its economic standing. Its soldiers still fight in corners of the world far removed from this tiny island off the northwest coast of Europe. Hundreds have died in Afghanistan and Iraq in the last decade. I'm Joe Glenton. I was Lance Corporal Glenton of 13 Air Assault Regiment until I was jailed for refusing to fight in Afghanistan. And that's why it's important for me to find out why young men volunteer to risk their lives in conflicts which the majority of their fellow citizens regard as unjust and illegal. But the same question is important for every parent who has a son or daughter of recruitment age, and for every taxpayer who cares how the military spend their money, and for every citizen who cares about the political health of their country. So join me for The Soldier Myth and The War on Terror, a 4-part series that talks to frontline soldiers about recruitment, training, fighting, and coming home. The soldiers who returned from the War on Terror do so as changed men. They have endured a modern-day rite of passage. The term hero is now so overused as to be emptied of meaning, but, as we'll see, some hold these soldiers to be just that. In reality, surviving the war is only half the battle, and it can be just as hard to survive the peace. Ben Griffin developed moral objections to serving in Iraq and was quickly discharged to prevent him putting off his fellow soldiers. I asked him if he found this process easy.
No, I left the army suddenly, and I didn't expect to leave the army. I was a career soldier. I'd been in the army for 8 years. I decided that I couldn't serve in Iraq anymore. So I made that decision, and as a result of that decision, I was discharged from the army. I wasn't really expecting it. I didn't really have much time to prepare for that. I thought that it'd be quite easy for me to get a job, and I found it difficult to find a job that I wanted to do. I mean, I found it fairly easy to get work, but I found it difficult to find a job that I actually, felt fulfilled or, could see me doing.
Alcohol plays a big part in military culture. However, outside the discipline of your regiment, this can cause problems for newly discharged soldiers.
I had quite a big problem with alcohol when I left the military. Alcohol, I think, within the military is used as a bit of a treat. You know, like when you train a dog and the dog sits, you give it a little chocolate or biscuit, and the dog lies down and you give it another biscuit. Well, in the military, you go on a 3-month exercise, and at the end of the exercise, you're allowed to go on the piss for 3 days and drink as much as you want. Or you go to Northern Ireland for 6 months, and then you get 2 weeks off and you drink as much as you want. And the alcohol is always seen as a sort of reward. I don't think that's, actually spelt out, but that's how it works. There's always alcohol at the end of these periods of hardship. And you leave the army, and you're able to drink whenever you want. There's no control on it. You're not on operations. There's no sort of 2-can limit or period of abstinence. And I found it very difficult. I think I used alcohol as a coping mechanism, as a way of coping with being out of the army, with dealing with civilian life, with dealing with sort of, intrusive thoughts about what had happened during my time in the army. And I found it very hard to come out of that. And I think a lot of guys do. There's a huge alcohol problem, I think, especially alcohol.
There are around 20,000 former soldiers in the judicial system. That is, on trial, in prison, or coming out of prison. Alcohol plays a large part in their offences. Many of these former soldiers are also homeless.
Do you feel like a hero? Is that the right word you'd use? Do you feel heroic? Do you put yourself in that?
I would say that I've done my part for the country, though. I would definitely say I've definitely served. I've done what's needed. You know what I mean? Others I haven't. I've not more else you could want from us, sort of thing. You know what I mean? I've done what was asked.
Yeah.
Of us, so.
Okay. And when talking about that, that's a really important point you've just made. Do you feel like you've, did you, going out there and doing that, do you feel like you've defended your country, like you've made a difference? Like, do you have those feelings? Is that your position on that?
I don't know, to be honest, I don't really know. I don't think like I've made a massive impact. I just think that it could be ongoing. Like, it's going to be like...
In terms of the wars?
Wars, yeah.
Do you see it going on? How long, I mean, do you see it as that it's going to go on forever?
I reckon, yeah.
Or maybe not forever, but yeah.
I've got a feeling that it's going to be going on for a fair few years from now.
Whatever the doubts over what we were involved in, and even if we come to reject the institution completely, we soldiers all seem to miss aspects of our time in the army. It seems to provide something which young men and women are convinced they need.
Yeah, the comradeship, that sense of closeness to your mates. You spend a lot of time with people in the military. Some of the guys I serve with, I spent pretty much every day with, for 6 years, 24 hours a day away on operations, and you really get to know people and trust people and people you can rely on, and there's no sense of having to ask or having to beg or anything like that, you just do that for your comrades. I also miss the hardship of it, might be a bit of a weirdo, but I quite liked being cold and wet and, going without food or water for a bit, or, tramping over the mountains with a heavy weight on your back. There's a sense of something a bit more old-fashioned about it. There's very limited opportunity in modern life for young males to physically exert themselves. There's no coal mines to work in. I'm not saying they were good or hard industry, heavy industry, and that's something that the military gives you. That sense of being able to do a job that involves physical, physical aspect to it. So I miss that as well.
Like many soldiers, myself included, Craig came back from war suffering from depression. This went untreated, and so he went absent without leave.
Did the army give you any support with mental health stuff?
Nah, not really. The people like at Abingdon barracks, they were really supportive. There was a fair few, but then they sent us to Colchester Military Prison Correctional Facility. Sent there.
Did you get any support there?
Nah, my support was when I went to see the med centre. I asked for antidepressants again.
Some of Glenn's friends who joined around the same time as him were badly affected by their experiences.
The one lad, he's come back and he's been discharged because of an injury.
Yeah.
Nothing too serious by the looks of it, because he's got all his limbs and all the rest of it. And I'd probably say he has. And then I've got another friend who was served at our regiment, and he lost a dear friend,
Yeah.
He was there with him when he lost him,
Yeah.
And I think it's affected him. I can't talk to him personally, but
Yeah.
from what I can see,
Yeah.
I think it's affected him.
Needless to say, not everyone comes home. I asked Joan Humphreys what it was like to attend her grandson's military funeral.
Badly organised play. Horrible.
So did the military organise the funeral?
Yep, Kevin asked for a military funeral. And so, most soldiers do. Why'd you do it for him? But the firing of the guns and the pipes. Firing of the guns I really hated. Just... And the fly past from the RAF and all that sort of thing.
Glenn left the army soon after coming home. I asked him why.
I came back and it was just the complete opposite.
Yeah.
Going from like a bungee cord, and working like that, and then came back and we were slack.
Yeah.
And I just got completely and utterly bored at my brains. It was one of the most boring.
Did you miss operations?
I did, yeah, I did. I enjoyed doing what I was doing. You're doing your job, and then when you come back from one extreme to another of doing nothing, there wasn't even a great deal to do. I thought, I can't be doing this no more. I just left because there was no in between. You didn't slowly get used to your normal life. It was just, went on holiday, that was brilliant.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that, and then when I got back to work, there was nothing to do. Kind of, took the stuffing out of me.
So the switch from high-tempo operations to life in barracks can have a very jarring effect on soldiers. In my own experience, you come home to a world which makes no sense after the buzz of serving in a war. Since leaving the army, Ben Griffin has started a UK branch of a US organisation called Veterans for Peace. It has already attracted a number of veterans who now oppose the wars into which they were thrust.
I really feel passionately about trying to get the truth of these conflicts into the public domain, into the public psyche. I think the public has sold a story through computer games, films, the media, newspaper stories, books glorifying war that is untrue.
For some of us, we still hope that something good can come from the sacrifices that have been made.
I got what I wanted out of it. You
Which
know,
was?
the excitement to see what life really was like. Because I can honestly say, I know a bit more about life. Most people in this country don't know nothing other than their town, you know. Yeah. I've seen how other people live and suffer and do things, you know. So in that sense, you know, it's made me a better person, I hope, and understanding other people's plight, you know. But was it worth it as a war? I don't know. I thought it was to begin with. Now I don't know, because it just seems to be dragging on and there doesn't seem to be any end to it.
For Ben, it's a question of holding the right people to account, rather than scapegoating soldiers who've joined due to a mix of ideological and economic factors.
I think we need to acknowledge that this is what happens when you send young men to war. So we need to be a lot more careful about when we send our soldiers to war. They happen because we're there. Why are we there? Because our politicians have sent us there. Why have our politicians sent us there?
A very different approach is taken by one of the main post-9/11 military charities, Help for Heroes. For me as an Afghanistan veteran, while this organisation has clearly helped many injured soldiers, it also serves a political function. Despite claims on the Help for Heroes website that it is merely concerned with the welfare of the blokes. The blokes, according to the website, are the men and women who served in the post-9/11 occupations. Arguably as a result, the term hero has become widely used.
I take it the argument basically is that anyone who's served in the military is a hero in some sense, which would include me and include you. Do you feel like a hero?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't think I've done anything heroic. You know,
but you were a soldier in Afghanistan, you served, you saw combat.
Well, I think help the heroes, using that word, I think, is to try and respect the guys who haven't come back, you know, who have served the country, if you want to use that word, and have paid the ultimate price, you know. They've gone with either their lives or they've come back with horrific injuries that they'll never recover from, you know. But I myself, I'm not a hero. I've not done anything heroic. I've just done what I've been trained to do. But those guys, in some situations, have done the ultimate thing, you know. Yeah. In some cases, some of them have done it through heroism, you know. Yeah. And at the end of the day, maybe they need that. You know, help the heroes shouldn't be. Maybe they should bring it down. Yeah. The generalisation. Maybe they should get back to basics and say it's for the blokes that have come back injured. You know, they're the heroes. The rest of us, we just do our job, you know.
Among the patrons and trustees of Help the Heroes are Andy McNabb, a former SAS soldier turned author, presenter and columnist Jeremy Clarkson, Judge Advocate General Blackett, who was involved in my trial for refusing to return to Afghanistan, and even a vice president of Shell Oil. I asked Lindsay German, convener of Stop the War Coalition, how she viewed the rise of these charities.
I think Help for Heroes was a very deliberate attempt to counter the anti-war movement. It was a very deliberate attempt to say, okay, we've had these wars that were unpopular. We've had actually military families, people like Rose Gentle and Reg Keys and some of these people who had campaigned very, in my opinion, much more bravely than most of these people who go on about heroes all the time, have been very, very brave in campaigning against the government, against the military. And what the military and the government decided to do in response was to try to set up their own sort of family-friendly, pro-troops operation. And I think this is what Help for Heroes is very much part of. The fact that Jeremy Clarkson is one of its patrons, well, that probably says most of what needs to be said about it.
Public donations to these kinds of initiatives have seen the opening of medical facilities for the rehabilitation and treatment of soldiers. But is it really the case that there isn't enough money to provide for soldiers wounded in wars of choice?
Unfortunately, if they didn't have it,
Yeah.
what were where would these people be now? You know.
Yeah, this is,
They-
and that's a really interesting, because I often look at it and they go, their argument is often, you know, there's not enough money, whereas to me clearly there is enough money, and so that's the point when I go, so why are they actually doing it? Because I mean, you know, if you were to tax the banks, scrap Trident, pull out of Afghanistan, you know, these are hugely expensive, or things that would provide a lot of money. So to me, I think, well, there is enough money. So what other function does it have beyond the, you know, the need to help these guys? And to me, that's where I start to go, well, this has a political agenda, which detracts from that. To me, it's almost disrespectful to those guys. You know, it's for both of us. I think it's a very, you know, it's a sensitive topic, because this is very close to us both as former soldiers.
When your government can't even provide the right treatment for the guys coming back,
Exactly.
I'm happy to support.
Yeah.
By, you know,
Yeah.
doing charity and things.
Because you know some of those blokes, don't you? You know those guys. You know guys that, or
yeah, I know guys.
you feel a certain kinship with those guys, because it could have been you, it could have been
Could
me.
be anyone, couldn't it? You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so unfortunately, if the state isn't able to support them, then I think we should all try and help. And going by the people that you claim, you know, got their own agendas.
Yeah.
They're their own agendas, you know. They're all different people from different sections of life.
Yeah.
Whether or not they're not all gang together because they want one main agenda. They've got their own to make themselves look patriotic, to make themselves look good in the public eye, because they're all public figures, aren't they?
It seems to me that much of the jingoism which is given space in the media today reflects that of earlier periods of history. To try and get to the bottom of it, I spoke to Dr. Neil Faulkner, a military historian and archaeologist.
I'm afraid Help for Heroes are very political. And what you've got, it seems to me, is you've got an exploitation of the fact that most of us, most ordinary folk, whether we're pro-war or anti-war, and most of us, according to the opinion polls, are anti-war, are very sympathetic towards the guys who are being sent out to do it and the consequences of that. The maiming of these guys, the killing of these guys, the psychiatric damage done to these guys. Very sympathetic, and want to contribute to making that good. So we do want to contribute to charities that are looking after soldiers. Now that, of course, is exploited by our rulers, because they become the patrons, they become the supporters, they become the people who are setting up these charities. And this goes back to the First World War. And it's worth just using that as the start point for this kind of thing, because the casualties in the First World War were so massive that the British ruling class, in particular the British ruling class, felt that it had to do something to commemorate the dead in a way that had never been done before in the case of previous wars. So you had a whole industry developing of poppies, of Remembrance Sunday, of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, of the deliberate embracing of the dead as fallen heroes, as men who've made the ultimate sacrifice, who deserve to be honoured, and of course all sorts of charities. The poppy charity is the most obvious one, that are there actually to help those who have been bereaved or who have become casualties. Now all of that is embraced by our rulers, who wear their poppies, who become the patrons of Help for Heroes, who are all there parading on Remembrance Sunday by the cenotaph, at the same time as they launch new imperialist wars that results in further casualties. And we're all trapped, in a sense, because all of us instinctively want to contribute, but we find the only way we can do it is by signing up to what is a highly political project being organised by people who are starting new wars.
I asked Matt Horn, a former infantry soldier who served in Iraq during the insurgency there, what he thought about being branded a hero for serving in a war he came to believe was unjustified.
Heroism, basically that idea of heroism with soldiers, is more about public perception, about diverting attention from the war itself to diverting the attention to soldiers. And the overuse of the word hero is just a consequence of that they try to, it's sort of the media and the government trying to get the public to back the soldiers, whether it's a sort of psychological sort of deception, if you will, that people in general will support their troops, whether they support the war or not, because the job itself is really hard and it's a difficult job. People put their lives on the line, so naturally people tend to respect that, and that's what it's capitalizing on, that idea that, you know, you might not support the war, but at least support your troops, and in doing so you're indirectly supporting the war itself.
That bad things happen in war is obvious, so what can we do about it? There is one final myth which remains to be punctured, and it's one that was very personal to me. Much is made of a soldier's obligation to the crown, the government, and so on. For me, this is little more than empty moralism, and it serves only to reinforce the aims of those who initiated these wars, and who continue to send soldiers to fight and die on the back of their lies. So can a soldier, if he feels compelled, refuse to fight in the wars?
My understanding is that conscientious objection is a legal and contractual right, kept very quiet. But is that the case? Am I right to say that?
Yeah, there's a legal right to express a conscientious objection to military service. It can be a general objection to all kinds of military service, or it can be a specific objection to a specific order to deploy to a particular theatre of war. You can claim that right, and if that right is upheld, you can be released from service with an honourable discharge.
So why don't more people exercise this right?
Very few people are aware of it, of course. I mean, the average reading age of someone joining the infantry is 10, so it's unlikely that they will be familiar with a term like conscientious objection or what that means. It'd be unlikely, I think, that if they are experiencing conscientious objection, they will be able to label it as such. So, although the right is there, it's very difficult for people to access if they are experiencing a conscientious objection.
Where is this information hidden?
It's certainly not publicised. It's certainly very difficult to find information out about it. The procedures for expressing your right to conscientious objection are not in the public domain, and we've had to get them through the Freedom of Information Act. So they're not openly available to young people who are in the armed forces and maybe experiencing a conscientious objection.
So there you have it. Even if you're already serving in the military, you have the legal right to object to the wars, to have your objection recognised and to be discharged. And this is the case whether the military like it or not. As I found out, the military or the government might make it hard for you, but as a soldier, you don't have to go along with their project in the Middle East. I'd suggest if Blair or Cameron and their like are so very keen to fight illegitimate wars in Afghanistan, Iraq or elsewhere, they are welcome to do it themselves. The reality is, nobody else has to. The alternative is passivity as we watch the poppy-wearing politicians who started the wars jostle to be on camera every Remembrance Day, even as they plan new wars for our soldiers to die in.